What's going on, everybody? I am Sega Lord X, and in this episode we're going to be talking about shoot 'em ups on the Sega CD. Now, as you guys know, the Sega CD did not have a massive library of games, so that means it didn't have a ton of shoot 'em ups either, but it did have some good ones. We're going to take a look at 8 of them here. Let's get started. In late 1994, the core design developed Soulstar would be released. This 3D shooter would be one of the few games designed for the Sega CD that really showed off its sprite and background scaling abilities. It incorporates both on-rails and free-roaming areas, as well as a few different variations of your ship. You are on a mission to destroy the aliens that wrecked your homeworld, and you're the only one left that can avenge your people. Soulstar was an absolute tour de force of graphics when it launched. It was colorful, smooth, had a great 3D feel, and really showed that the Sega CD games could have offered something special had developers used it to do so. The soundtrack is also great, offering up a fully orchestral score that drives the game the entire way. Gameplay feels similar to something like Galaxy Force, but with much smoother mechanics and responsiveness. This one is hard in the later levels too, adding tons of playability. You'll blast through the first few levels, but be prepared for it to spike later on. Although this game was also in development for both the 32X and Jaguar, it would only see a final release on the Sega CD. You can't play it anywhere else, and the price this thing sells for reflects that directly. A complete in-box copy will run you nearly $100 in fact. That's a steep barrier of entry, I admit, but the Sega CD didn't see a ton of software that truly took advantage of its hardware scaling engine, and since you can't play it anywhere else, I'd say it's a definite must-own for the machine. Late 1991 would bring the Wolf Team-developed Soul Feast to the platform. This port of the X68000 version features new cutscenes and a new soundtrack, but is otherwise very close in content. Most differences boil down to color and art assets being drawn slightly different. If I had to describe Soul Feast in as few words as possible, I'd call it serviceable. Nothing about Soul Feast is going to blow you away, but what is here is quite playable. The graphics have an early 16-bit aesthetic about them, meaning that they are colorful and have some solid parallax scrolling effects, but are nothing to write home about otherwise. The soundtrack has some winners too, with a few of them worth taking along with you on your phone. Soul Feast would become a pack-in when the Sega CD was released in North America, making it dirt cheap to own today. If you can get it for a good price, it's a decent shooter with enough playability to finish it a few times. Of note to those interested, this game would see a cartridge port to the Genesis under the name Soul Deece that same year. In mid-1993, GameArts would give the Sega CD one of its most popular and ultimately infamous shooters in Sylphy. You are Earth's last line of defense against a terrorist fleet with the weaponry to destroy the planet. Your experimental starship Sylphy is Earth's only hope for survival. This port of the ancient PC-88 version of the game uses video wallpaper to provide the battlefield, then overlaying simple polygonal enemies for you to interact with. This effect was impressive back then, and gave you a feeling your Sega CD was an absolute beast. The gameplay was rather simple, however, with some weak and unimpressive power-ups and lackluster boss battles. Hindsight has a way of muddying up the truth of history, and most people see Sylphy as a poor piece of software for the platform. The truth is, this was a major boon for the system in 1993, showing graphics that simply blew you away at the time. It's an important piece of the platform's history, even if its gameplay was ultra simplistic. Mid-1995 would bring us a port of the Hudson Soft PC Engine CD classic, Lords of Thunder. I picked this one up after I had purchased a Saturn, and I still loved every minute of it. Choose the order of your starting stages, and blast enemies to an absolutely incredible rock soundtrack. Seriously, man, these are some of the best shoot 'em up tunes ever conceived, and every single track on it deserves ripping and carrying with you. No joke, just take a listen for a few seconds. Graphically, the game isn't as colorful as the original, but still manages to look great, with tons of enemies on screen and little slowdown to speak of. The art style is rather good too, mixing a sort of medieval style with machines and organic enemies. Gameplay is driven by the great soundtrack, with great boss battles and solid power-ups, providing a very playable and beatable experience. While the original PC Engine release remains the definitive version of this game, this port still has its place, and is still a great game. Because it was released late in the Sega CD's life, it has skyrocketed in price, now going for well over $150. Compile would develop the late 1992 release Robo LS. This Sega CD exclusive follows in the steps of Musha, another vertically scrolling shooter release from Compile on the Sega Genesis. Set in feudal Japan, you pilot your giant steam-powered mech in a bid to stop your maniacal brother Tetsu from destroying your home and friends. If you've played Musha before, you know exactly what to expect from this game, as the presentation is very similar. In fact, this could have easily been a Genesis game on its own, with only the CD soundtrack standing out as the lone reason it's on the hardware. You do get a scaling sprite or two here and there, but it's nothing to speak of. The game is quite good, however, with solid power-ups, great color and animation, and no slowdown to hamper the pleasurable gameplay experience. The aforementioned CD soundtrack is really well done, with a number of them being worthy of listening to outside the game. In a direct head-to-head comparison with Musha, this one holds up quite well. It's got the look and feel, and it plays well enough to earn its place in your collection. I've seen complete copies go for as little as $100, so be patient, watch those auctions, and buy accordingly. Namco would bring its arcade polygon classic Starblade to the Sega CD in late 1994. This one was designed to be a jaw-dropper in 1991, and the first time I saw a machine at my local arcade, it did just that. Unfortunately, the Sega CD version comes with a ton of concessions. First, the graphics have been severely downgraded here, with wireframe enemies replacing the arcade's flat shaded polygons, and larger enemies replaced with video backgrounds, similar to Sylphy. It still managed to impress a bit when it launched for the platform, but Namco sought a straight port here, and Starblade is a notoriously short game. The Sega CD version can be beaten in under 20 minutes once you get decent at the game, leaving virtually no reason to play it again. The game also uses the mouse for the Japanese Mega CD release, making the game far easier to beat. The game isn't crazy expensive, so if you're curious, take a look. To those that hated full motion video shooters of the time, this is a definite miss for you. The Japanese Mega CD version is dirt cheap for you import guys. Keio Flying Squadron would see a release in late 1993 by Victor Entertainment. This Sega CD exclusive is often considered one of the best games on the system, and rightfully so. It's a beautiful game that has great animation, awesome art, and a soundtrack from the cute-em-up gods. While the gameplay is straightforward and easy to get into, it's never dull, and you'll keep playing just to see what the next stage looks like, and what crazy boss you'll be fighting. The game takes a number of cues from Konami classics like Gradius and Parodius, such as your dragon's smaller companions acting like options, and the overall comical art style and boss battles. The story is pure Japanese insanity, with our hero Rami dressed in a bunny suit riding atop her pet dragon Spot trying to recover an artifact from a super intelligent raccoon that is hell-bent on taking over the world. Due to its quality, rarity, and being locked to the platform, this one goes for a ton of money complete and in mint shape, far more than any one game is worth, and well out of reach of the average gamer. The Japanese version tends to sell for far less, so if you have the means, get it there. Mid-1993 would bring the Mega CD Bari Arm, or Android Assault in North America, by Human Entertainment. You pilot a ship capable of transforming into a mech on your mission to protect space colonies from a rival nation. Despite it often not getting the respect of games like Keio Flying Squadron or Robo LS, I found this game to be quite good. The graphical presentation is pure Genesis, lots of stuff on screen, lots of parallax scrolling, and little slowdown to speak of. It won't win any awards, and doesn't compete with the best on the system, but still manages a solid showing worth noting. The soundtrack also has flashes of brilliance, and while not every track is a winner, I enjoyed it overall. Gameplay is easy to get into, with a strong set of weapon upgrades and a busy screen of enemies trying to kill you. Large bosses fill the screen at the end of each stage, and have enough variation to push you on to see the next one. While this one isn't considered among the elites, I find it to be extremely playable and a great addition to the machine. Unfortunately, it never saw a PAL release to my knowledge, meaning you guys in Europe will need to import it if you want to add it to your collection. Now, as you guys know, the Sega CD is sort of a joke in the mainstream. A lot of people don't give it the respect it deserves. But if you've been a Sega fan for any length of time, you know good and well the Sega CD had a lot of really good games. These shooters here were definitely some of them, and I had an absolute blast playing almost every single one. If you need to look at the Sega CD for shooters, definitely start with these here. I am Sega Lord X. I really appreciate you guys watching. I will catch you next time.